2 years ago, I did something I thought would bond me and my cousin, my best friend, forever. I literally saved her life. But today, she won't even look at me, won't acknowledge me in a crowded room. And frankly, I'm starting to wonder if I should have just walked away that day. The truth is, sometimes the greatest act of love can become the deepest source of resentment, a toxic, suffocating debt that a person can never repay. It's a bitter lesson I learned the hard way. The Portland night was a living, breathing thing, thick with the humid promise of rain and the low thrum of a party that had long since crossed the line from celebration into something teetering precariously on the edge of disaster. My own breath hitched in my throat, a shallow, panicked gasp that mirrored the frantic beating of my heart against my ribs. My hands, slick with a cold sweat that had nothing to do with the muggy air, trembled violently as I fumbled with the archaic recording function on my old Nokia phone. The cheap plastic felt clammy and uncertain in my grip, a fragile shield against the terrifying reality unfolding just beyond the thin walls of the cramped apartment. In the next room, separated from me by a flimsy door that felt as thin and breakable as my own resolve, I could hear Ava's voice. My cousin, my best friend, since scraped knees and whispered secrets under summer stars. But tonight, her laughter was brittle, her words slurred with a dangerous looseness I'd never heard before, laced with a reckless abandon that sent shivers of icy dread down my spine. She was talking to some guy with a reputation I knew was dangerous, and the conversation was taking a turn that made my stomach drop into a cold, empty abyss. It wasn't just the usual party foolishness, the kind we'd navigated countless times before. Tonight felt different, charged with an undercurrent of something darker, something that whispered of irreversible consequences. I wasn't just worried she'd make a mistake, a regrettable memory to laugh about later. The icy dread gripping me was far more profound. I was terrified, down to the very marrow of my bones, that she wouldn't make it out of this night unscathed, that one wrong step, one careless word, could send her spiraling into a darkness I couldn't reach. I knew, with a chilling certainty that settled like a lead weight in my gut, that I had to do something. Anything. Even if it meant shattering the fragile trust between us, even if it meant becoming the villain in her story. My mind raced, a frantic hamster wheel of impossible choices. Confront her directly, risk escalating the situation, pushing her further into a bad situation out of teenage rebellion? Try to reason with her later, after who knows what damage had been done? No, time was a luxury we didn't have. In that moment, fueled by a terror so pure it stripped away all doubt, I made the only decision that felt like a desperate lifeline. I called the police. My fingers flew across the numb keypad, each digit pressed with a trembling urgency. I told the dispatcher there was a noise complaint at the address, a chaotic party disturbing the peace. It was a calculated lie, a necessary deception, a way to get them there, to inject an outside force into a situation that felt like it was hurtling towards disaster, without directly incriminating Ava or arousing anyone's suspicion. It was the hardest decision of my life, a suffocating moral dilemma that felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest, stealing the very air from my lungs. I was her family, her protector, in the unspoken language of cousins who'd practically grown up as sisters, her keeper, in the quiet pact we'd made years ago to always have each other's backs. I had to choose between her immediate, visible safety and the invisible, fragile architecture of her future trust in me. In that terrifying moment, I believed with every fiber of my being that I was making the only possible choice, an act born not of judgment, but of a fierce, unwavering love. An act of sheer, desperate survival for the both of us. But as the distant wail of sirens began to faintly pierce through the music, a cold premonition settled over me, a whisper of the devastating truth. I had no idea that my desperate choice to save her from a potential catastrophe would become the very weapon she would wield against me, turning my impulsive act of love, my frantic attempt to protect her, into a source of a bitter, profound hatred that would sever the ties of our shared history. You'd think, wouldn't you, that once the flashing lights faded, once the echoing shouts of the police died down, once the cold sobriety of the aftermath hit, she'd look at me with tear-filled eyes, a trembling smile, and a heartfelt thank you that would erase the fear that still clung to my bones. That the realization of what could have been would dawn on her, a stark and terrifying clarity. But instead, when the last police car finally pulled away from the curb, its red and blue lights disappearing into the rainy Portland night, taking Ava away from the danger, and a night that could irrevocably alter the course of her young life in unimaginable ways, she turned on me. Her face, tear-streaked and flushed with a volatile cocktail of shame, fury, and a raw, wounded pride, was a distorted mask I didn't recognize, a chilling reflection of the chasm that had suddenly opened between us. "I can't believe you did this," she screamed, her voice a raw, angry shriek that pierced through the stunned silence of the remaining partygoers. You ruined my fun. You embarrassed me, dragged me out like some criminal by involving the police. And now my parents, oh my God, my parents will never trust me again. Each word hit me like a physical blow, a sharp, unexpected jab that stole the air from my lungs and left me reeling. My mind reeled, trying to reconcile the terror I had felt with the incandescent rage blazing in her eyes. I stood there, utterly speechless, watching the person I loved most in the world, whose safety had been hanging by the thinnest of threads just moments ago, and all she could focus on was her bruised ego, her tarnished reputation, her fear of parental disapproval. It was a cold, cruel irony, a perverse twist of fate that felt impossible to comprehend. I had reached into the encroaching darkness, pulled her back from a precipice she hadn't even seen, and her only thought, her only reaction, was of the fleeting, dangerous pleasure she believed I had stolen from her. The chasm that ripped open between us in that single, devastating moment was wide and deep, a seemingly bottomless canyon carved out of my good intentions, my desperate fear, and her seething, self-absorbed resentment. I couldn't believe it. Just moments before, my heart had been pounding with a primal terror for her safety. And now, as the adrenaline finally began to recede, all I could hear was the echo of her bitter, furious accusations, each syllable a fresh stab wound. The gratitude I had so naively expected, the relief I had longed to see in her eyes, was replaced by a venomous fury that felt like a profound betrayal of its own, a cruel and undeserved punishment for caring too much. Over the slow, agonizing passage of time, the distance between us didn't just remain a canyon. It grew into a seemingly unbridgeable, gaping void, a silent testament to the fractured remains of our once unbreakable bond. The raw, incandescent anger of that night in Portland didn't simply fade away like a bad dream. It festered, a deep, slow-burning resentment that poisoned everything that had once connected us. At family gatherings, the very air would crackle with unspoken tension whenever we were in the same room. She'd actively avoid me, her movements deliberate, her back often turned to me with a silent, pointed finality that spoke volumes more than any shouted words. The room would feel suddenly, palpably colder whenever she walked in, a tangible manifestation of the icy wall she had erected between us. On social media, where our friendship was once so public, so intertwined, a vibrant tapestry of shared jokes and mutual support, she unfollowed me with a swift, decisive click, a quiet, digital erasure that screamed louder than any vitriolic rant. It was a calculated severing of ties, a public declaration of our fractured connection. And it wasn't just passive avoidance. She actively twisted the narrative, painting me as the villain in her story. She'd whisper to our relatives, her voice dripping with injured indignation, that I had snitched on her, that I was the reason she lost her freedom. The whispers would inevitably find their way back to me, each carefully crafted falsehood twisting the knife a little deeper. I tried, with a desperate, persistent ache in my heart, to reach out across the widening gulf, to mend the tattered edges of the bond that had once felt so strong, so unbreakable. I sent her long, rambling text messages, pouring out my fears, my regrets, even though a small, rational voice inside insisted I had nothing to truly apologize for. My desperate longing for the friendship we had lost. Those messages remained stubbornly unanswered, swallowed by the digital ether. I even attempted a phone call once, the dial tone stretching into an eternity of unanswered rings. Her response, when it finally came weeks later, a curt, dismissive text message that felt like a slap in the face, was a single, cutting line that sliced through all my fragile attempts at healing and reconciliation, leaving me bleeding anew. "Don't act like a hero," it read, cold and devoid of any warmth. "You just wanted attention." Those words, so devoid of understanding, so laced with bitter accusation, cut deeper than anything she had screamed that night, deeper than her rage, deeper even than her silent avoidance. They stripped my impulsive actions of their desperate love, their genuine fear, and replaced them with a shallow, selfish motive I had never, ever possessed. A cold knot of grief tightened in my chest, a heavy weight that settled there permanently. To her, I wasn't a cousin who had acted out of fear and love. I wasn't a friend who had intervened in what I believed was a dangerous situation. In her eyes, I was simply another antagonist in her teenage drama, a spotlight-seeking meddler who had dared to disrupt her fun. The last time we truly spoke, the air between us was thick with a painful, suffocating silence, a heavy, unspoken history that had been building, layer upon layer, for what felt like an eternity. I saw her at a strained, uncomfortable family gathering, the kind where everyone pretended that the gaping hole in our relationship didn't exist. We found ourselves standing alone in a quiet, shadowed corner of the house. The forced laughter and polite conversation of the other guests, a muffled, surreal backdrop to our fractured existence. She finally turned to me, her eyes meeting mine for the first time in what felt like years, but they held only a cold, unwavering resentment, a familiar chill that settled deep in my bones. And then she said it. The words hanging in the air like a death sentence to our past, delivered straight up without a single hint of warmth, without even a flicker of nostalgia for the years we had shared. If you hadn't meddled that night, things would be different, maybe even better. I just froze, my breath catching in my throat. The words hung in the air, a devastating, utterly illogical accusation that felt impossible to fully comprehend. My mind reeled, trying to grasp the sheer weight of her statement. How do you even begin to respond to someone who genuinely wishes you hadn't saved them? It's a question that has haunted the quiet corners of my mind ever since, a persistent, unanswerable ghost of a possibility, a terrifying alternate reality where I had stood by and done nothing, a reality where the consequences could have been so much worse. The thought had never once occurred to me, not even in my darkest moments of doubt and self-recrimination, that she could harbor such a profound resentment, that her deep-seated hatred for me stemmed from a place of such profound, undeniable debt. It's a debt she can never truly repay, a constant, unwelcome reminder of her own vulnerability, of my perceived interference in her choices, of the night she lost control. And maybe, just maybe, that kind of suffocating, unspoken obligation feels far worse to her than any fleeting night of reckless abandon, any momentary thrill she believed I had so cruelly stolen. The silence that followed her chilling words was heavier, louder, more accusatory than any screaming match we could have ever had. It was a silence, pregnant with all the things that went unsaid, all the love that had been lost, all the fragile hope that had been irrevocably extinguished. I didn't respond. I simply couldn't find the words. And I knew in that moment, staring into the cold emptiness in her eyes, in the face of her terrible, heartbreaking confession, that there was truly no way back across the chasm that now separated us. It's been 2 long, silent years since that final, devastating conversation, a stark and painful milestone in the fractured timeline of our lives. She wants absolutely nothing to do with me, her silence a deafening wall, and I finally, reluctantly, stopped chasing her ghost, stopped sending unanswered messages into the void. The quiet of our permanent separation is a strange paradox, a hollow relief tinged with a persistent, gnawing grief for the vibrant, irreplaceable bond that is now irrevocably broken. The phone stays stubbornly silent, her number erased, not just from my contacts, but it feels from the very fabric of my existence. The vast distance that stretches between us, both physical and emotional, is a stark testament to a love that was ultimately fractured beyond repair by a single, impulsive act of survival. But late at night, when the world around me falls silent and the ghosts of the past creep out of the shadows, I still replay that chaotic, terrifying moment in my head, her lying there, vulnerable, her young life hanging precariously in the balance. A terrifying fragility that still has the power to steal my breath and send a shiver of icy fear down my spine. And in those quiet, haunted hours, I know, with a conviction that has never wavered, not even in the face of her unwavering hatred, no matter how much pain and suffering she has inadvertently inflicted upon me through her resentment, I'd still do it again. Without a single moment of hesitation, without a flicker of doubt. Because sometimes, saving someone doesn't make you their hero, doesn't earn you a grateful embrace or a lifetime of unwavering loyalty. It simply makes you their unwanted reminder. A living, breathing ghost of a night they desperately want to forget. A walking, talking monument to their greatest vulnerability. And a constant, unspoken reminder of the reckless, self-destructive path they no longer want to acknowledge. And that, I've come to realize, is a burden they may never be willing or able to forgive. So now, as the credits roll on this fractured chapter of my life, I ask you, the silent witness to my story. Was I truly wrong to reach into the darkness and save a life, even when the very person I saved now wishes, with all her heart, that I had simply stood by and done nothing? Was my desperate choice to protect her from herself, from a potentially devastating outcome, ultimately worth the agonizing, permanent loss of her from my life?